joining us today. My name is Mrna, and I'm a co-host today in Demystifying the myths of the COVID-19 vaccine. We have a wonderful guest speaker who is Dr. Juan Carlos Belliard, and we're going to introduce him in a little bit. Before we do that, Marissa has some logistical things that she's going to give us today.
Thank you, Mars. Welcome, everyone, and we are excited to have this session. We want to make sure that throughout the session, we do have, if you have any questions, please make sure that you put them in the chat. We will have an opportunity to have Dr. Belliard answer the questions. We also have, as a guest speaker for this session, Dr. Jacinda. And so we will make sure that throughout the session, if you have any questions, we will look at them and have an opportunity for both our guest speakers to answer them. Also, as you come in, please mute yourself so we can make sure that all the questions are addressed and all of the answers are clearly heard from everybody. So I'm going to now turn it back to you, Mars, so you can officially welcome and introduce our presenters. I just want to personally thank both of our doctors here today because our community needs information. And so thank you so much for this amazing partnership, for giving us the time to be here with us today. And I want to thank all the community that's joining us. We need information and we need to pass this on to those who are not here today. We will be recording the session, as Mars mentioned, and we'll put it also in our Facebook page and our social media outlets. So with that, please, back to you, Mars.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you everybody for being here today. And thank you, Dr. Juan Carlos Belliard, for being here with us today. Just to be real transparent, this conversation was organic. Dr. Belliard and I are doing some work outside of what we're doing today, and just thinking about how do we demystify all the myths that we see on social media, the things that are put out there from various people. We don't fact check. And so this was like one of those times where we said, being that you're a prophet in your own land, a trusted individual, how can we get you on to really have a conversational opportunity today? And this is what this is today. It's going to be a conversation. It's not going to be this PowerPoint. We just did the Spanish session. We just got off that one, and it was very organic. We want this to be that way for you here in this room as well. So please feel free to ask a question in the chat. There'll be times where Dr. Belliard will unmute you if you want to talk and ask a question. Again, it's a very intimate conversation. We do have about almost 40 people on the call, so we want to be respectful, stay on mute, those kind of things. Dr. Belliard, I've known him now for, I want to say 16, 17 years since I came to work in San Bernardino City back in 2006. And Dr. Belliard and I worked on various committees. We were on the Latino Health Collaborative for many years, the African American Health Institute, where we were looking at how do we look at the disproportionality of health outcomes for communities of color. And so what we ended up doing is doing a lot of work together and very successful in trying to get information out to the public. And today, during the pandemic now, is this COVID thing. And so we want to get information that's accurate, that Dr. Belliard has done research on, that he has this expertise that can help us make a decision. And making a decision to get a vaccine is a personal decision. Although, he'll talk about some of the percentages of what we need to have herd immunity and where we're at now, it is still a personal decision. So Dr. Belliard is going to give us information to allow us to make an informative decision on whether we do or don't get a vaccine. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my good friend, who I call JC. I've known him for years as JC, but Dr. Juan Carlos Belliard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mars and Marissa. It's just a pleasure to connect with our community and talk about important things. I love seeing people's faces. If you're able to have your video on, if you're not, I understand. If it's a bad hair day, it's understandable. Mars knows all about bad hair days.
I do.
Oh, yes.
I was worried that you were going to give away our age there when you started talking about 2006. I'm like, oh boy. But yeah, this is such an important topic. And like in the last session, I'm just going to make it very conversational. I do hope that Dr. Jam, as we call her, has her slides, because I think there's there's some good information there for folks to look at. But I just want to kind of pause and remember where we were a year ago. During this pandemic, nowadays it's hard for me. Sometimes I don't know if it's Sunday morning or Wednesday morning, or I've been working from home, and it seems like we work 24/7 these days, especially with our vaccine kind of rollout and distribution. That's been consuming my life for the last few months. And I know Dr. Jem has been an amazing colleague in these efforts. And we've been doing these webinars with faith communities, with communities of color, with school districts. And I think it's so important to understand that knowledge is power. And we're not going to be able to make good decisions if we don't have the knowledge, and the right kind of knowledge too, because there's a lot of information out there that might not be knowledge. We live in an era where we just have to Google things or go to YouTube, and you can find all kinds of stuff. Some really good stuff and some really crazy stuff, right? So I think it's important to really kind of check what our sources are. And what I appreciate about science is that most scientists will tell you what they don't know. And I think that makes us a little nervous sometimes. It's like, we don't know this, but we're investigating it. We want to learn more about it. And what I can tell you about the vaccine right now is what we know about the vaccines that are available to us right now, and what we know about COVID. As a public health professional, I can tell you that we are much better off being protected with the vaccine than we are taking our chances with COVID. Now, with the last group, I talked a little bit about empathy. And I think this pandemic has been a good opportunity for us to exercise empathy. I asked the last group, how many people do you know, and just put numbers on the chat. How many people do you know that were infected by COVID in this last year? And I'm just curious. One, okay. $15, $20, $10. 10 and 2 died. So sorry. 30. More than 10. And our sincere condolences for those people who did not make it through this pandemic. I personally know, lost count. So this is a pandemic that has hit, 26 passed away. I know 8 people that passed away just in this last year. I lost 2 of my high school teachers who were in their older years, but they were still very healthy when they became sick with COVID-19. Being right across the street, my house is literally 2 blocks from the hospital. And I've seen the caravan of ambulances when we were in our last peak of the vaccine. And it's sobering. I mean, we have to understand that this is a virus that has affected us, very different from other diseases where, we feel it like maybe regionally or in one country more than the other. This has impacted the world. But it has impacted some communities more than others. And we have to understand that that's where the empathy piece comes in. Understanding that, these people that we call essential workers have borne the brunt of this pandemic. And the essential workers are the grocery store workers, the farm workers, the people that feed us, the people that take care of our kids, that are our elderly people, that work in the nursing homes, that deliver the mail. All these people that are essential workers have been hit the hardest. And many of our essential workers come from communities that have already been impacted by unhealthy environments, right? If you look at low-income communities, that's where most of our fast food places are. You don't find the Whole Food store in some of our communities, or you don't find a Sprouts in some of our low-income communities. Um, and so it's made certain populations more susceptible to this virus. So it's this burden of you're more exposed, more at risk because of where you live and the work that you do. And then if you end up coming into the hospital with COVID-19, you're at a higher risk of having a severe illness or even dying because of what we call these comorbidities, right? Chronic illnesses, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, all these things that make us more susceptible, and this virus really preys on that. I shared with the last group, going back to that, thinking about a year ago where we were. We had no idea where this was going, right? How many of you thought this would all be done by the summer of last year? Yeah, yeah. Some of us thought, yeah, this is going to blow over by summer. We'll have this under control. My daughter had a wedding in the summer. We went through probably 12 different variations of wedding plans, right? It went from a 200 plus guest wedding to a 25 guest wedding, which for the father of the bride was not such a bad thing. My bank account wasn't as impacted, so there are some good silver linings with COVID, I have to say. I think another thing that we learned in the process was that you can invite as many people to a wedding as you want. Just have them, do it online, and you can save yourself a pretty penny. So you can have a 500 guest wedding, and then in person you just keep it to close friends and relatives. So last year we didn't know where this was going. I remember the uncertainty of what's going to happen. Our son was coming home from college. We were telling him to hurry up and get home before everything locked down, before you couldn't travel across state lines. We didn't know what was going to happen. I remember going to the grocery store thinking, I'll just go pick up some beans and rice and oatmeal and some of the staple stuff to get us through the next few weeks. And there is a line outside of Stater Brothers, like wrapping around the block. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I went to the Loma Linda Market because it's a vegetarian grocery store. I thought the line would be shorter, and it was a little bit shorter. But when I got in, when they opened, I realized I've never experienced anxiety like I did that day. I had to decide if I was going to go get produce, or if I was going to get pasta, or if I was going to get my beans and rice. I couldn't get them all because by the time I got from one place to the other, it was gone. People were just snatched. I remember one gentleman was pushing 3 carts of food in front of me. And I was like, I started like literally hyperventilating, thinking like, what do I need to get? And I need more people to help me here. And that was the anxiety that we've experienced early on. People masks, and we were running out of. I remember we didn't even have hand sanitizer. I think there we go. We didn't have hand sanitizer. We were running out of supplies. There's a lot of uncertainty. So fast forward to where we are today. I think there's a lot more hope. We know more about this virus than we did before. Remember when I remember we wouldn't even bring groceries into the house before disinfecting everything in the garage. Remember that? Wiping everything down, washing all. I mean, it was a chore. Now we know the virus doesn't spread as much through surfaces as it does through the air, right? And that's why very simple precautions have saved us a lot. These little masks. So simple. Public health is so simple and inexpensive, but so difficult to implement, right? There's culture, there's personal preferences, there's a lot of things that kind of get in the way of doing things that are very simple and preventable. And I don't think that we're ever going to go back to 100% the way things were before. We're going to have to deal with this virus in different forms because it keeps mutating. There's different variants that are coming at us. And that's why Dr. Jam and I and other folks on our team here at Loma Linda have been very focused on getting the vaccine, not just here at Loma Linda. We have over 1,000 people a day that come through our Drayson Center to get vaccines, but we've been taking the vaccine out to the community. And I just want to let you know that for folks who are out there in the community who may not be navigating the internet well, our pop-up clinics in the community are paper-based. You can literally like walk up and get your shot. And we're trying to get as many people vaccinated as possible right now. And this is coming from a public health person who's I've seen how vaccines work around the world. I grew up in the era of polio. This is before Dr. Jam was born. But polio affected some of my classmates. And I remember some of my classmates that could not walk without crutches because of polio. And it was only because of the polio vaccine and the way that was distributed. Now polio was vicious against children, right? It's very different than COVID-19 that is affecting the older population. But it's campaigns like the polio vaccine campaign, the measles vaccine campaign that have really actually extended our longevity across the globe. And I know there's a lot of concern still, and it's okay to be worried, and it's okay to be worried about something that's new that we don't understand. I remember when, anything new that comes across our lives, we're going to be a little suspicious. I'm not an early adopter, right? I'm not the one that buys the first iPhone that comes out. I kind of let people check it out and see how it works and let the price go down a little bit. And I like to get the second or third generation, right? We don't necessarily have that luxury with the vaccine because we have this other threat, which is the virus. And it's a virus that is mutating. And then the last thing I want to say about this whole process since last year is we go through these cycles, right? We see the numbers start peaking and we shut down. We start being really careful and we take things really seriously. And then the numbers start going down again and they plateau. And that's what we're going through right now. We just went through a very dark winter. January was horrible here in the hospital. We had body bags just coming every day out of the hospital. And I know young nurses who just graduated this last year who were having to do this work, this very hard work of telling families their loved ones passed away, of seeing people die in front of them, and who couldn't sleep at night. They're still suffering from PTSD. These are 20-some-year-olds that have had to be doing this day in and day out. So we take it very personally and very seriously. But what I've noticed is for those of you who are into boats, when you steer a larger boat, the correction isn't like when you're driving. When you move the wheel on a car, the car immediately responds, right? On a boat, you move the tiller and it takes a few seconds for the boat to start moving in that direction. You move it the other way and it takes a few seconds to do that. We're seeing the same thing with this pandemic. We see the peaks. We start taking things seriously. We start wearing masks. We start, social distancing, not gathering in big groups. But as soon as we start seeing the numbers go down, we open up again and we start doing everything like we were doing it before. And then we start seeing the numbers go up, and then we start shutting down again. So it's this hammer and dance, what Dr. Fauci calls it, the hammer and dance of, clamping down and then dancing away, going back and forth. But if we can just be a little more patient and keep the social distancing until we get that herd immunity, which is what we're trying to get to, at least 70%, if not 80, 85% of our population, then we can really celebrate in style, right? But I think a lot of times we're celebrating way too early, and we're starting to see the fourth peak now. In Europe, it's happening with a new variant. In some of our states, we're starting to see it. Michigan is already getting hit. The hospitalization rates are going up in Michigan. And yeah, so there's a lot there to think about. But what I want you to think mostly is about this issue and this concept of empathy. Even if I have not been affected by COVID directly, the reason I wear a mask now is to encourage those who are not protected to wear it. Because I'm protected. I feel pretty good. And with people who have been vaccinated around me and my family, we don't have to wear this anymore. But I wear it to encourage and to model empathy and protection for others. So that's my little public health spiel. Let's have Dr. Jam show some of her work on the vaccine and introduce her. But I just feel privileged to be able to do this presentation with her because she's one of our new faculty here at the School of Pharmacy. She's an infectious disease expert, in case she doesn't tell you this herself. She's been through the training. She knows the vaccine in our pop-up clinics. She does she prepares the vaccines. She gave me this little memento here. It's a little Mrna vial that I get to keep as a souvenir because I got my Moderna. Some of my family got Pfizer. Some of my friends got Johnson & Johnson. And we're going to be talking about that. You know, what are the differences between the vaccines? What are some of the concerns that you have? That we want to honor those concerns and those fears. But we also want to give you that knowledge so you can have the power to make the best decision. Dr. Jam. And then we'll take the questions after your presentation there.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, because I saw Veronica's question, but honestly, I will likely answer your question while I'm presenting. But yeah, so I'm really excited to be here with you guys today. Dr. JC is one of my favorite people, so I'm excited to present with him. I think I was telling him that we meet together probably like three to four times a week, but we've been doing some really great work, trying to work really hard to get these vaccines in these majorly affected communities and amongst these minoritized groups. So I have a presentation that I have entitled Frequently Asked Questions. So I'll just start the presentation here. Oh, as soon as I share my screen, that's important, right? Okay, so we'll just get started really quickly. So I'll just talk about the different types of vaccines, and then I'll talk about the spike protein mutations and why it's important for us to still get vaccinated, irrespective of these. I'll talk a little bit about the clinical study highlights, really just focusing in on those minoritized communities that were included there and what do those study results mean. And then if we have time, I can go into COVID-19 and pregnancy and current recommendations. But honestly, we'll probably have these questions come up in our frequently asked questions. So I'll break before we get to these points. And if we don't touch on them, then I'll make sure to give you guys a summary before we wrap up. So I just like to start with giving some context about vaccines. Just what are vaccines, period? So I like to start with just live vaccines. So what is a live vaccine? So what it is a small piece of a virus that's injected into you, and your body then makes protection or immunity against that small piece of that virus. And then we can have inactivated vaccines, which are killed or dead viruses that are injected into you. But however, it still maintains just a little bit of activity, enough so that your body can recognize that you've made protection against it, that you've seen it before. So I like to always use this Tdap example. And I like to use that Tdap example because we know that you have to receive that vaccine like every 10 years. So you get that so that your body can remember, hey, I've actually seen Tdap before and I've made protection against it. So that's what we call our booster vaccine or our booster shot. And then we have mRNA vaccines. So mRNA vaccines So we have mRNA in our bodies normally. So this is what we see with our COVID-19 vaccines, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine. So we have mRNA in our bodies. mRNA sends messages to our bodies on specific proteins that we need to make for survival. So in regard to mRNA, I always like to think about it. I always like to think about mRNA, RNA, and DNA as a moon and honeymoon when we think about that base. Because I always get that question of, will it be integrated into my DNA? Well, the short answer is no. So with an mRNA, RNA, and DNA, we know it has that same base, but it's completely different. Quite similar to a moon and a honeymoon, right? When you go on a honeymoon, you know that you're definitely not going to the moon. So very different functions there. Never become the same. So we're injected with that mRNA vaccine. That mRNA vaccine sends the message to our body to make the spike protein. That's the specific protein that we want to make that's significant to the coronavirus. So coronavirus has this spike protein. Once our body sees this spike protein, it says, hey, this isn't supposed to be here. Let me make protection against this spike protein. So then should you ever see the coronavirus in real life, you'll be protected against it. So then we have these adenovirus vector vaccines, or what we see with the Johnson and Johnson or the Janssen or Janssen. It's correctly pronounced Janssen though over across the pond. And then we have the AstraZeneca vaccines. So with this adenovirus, it causes a low grade, similar to a cold, and in humans. So nothing significant. However, what it is good for is actually sending that message to our bodies on that particular spike protein to make that significant to the coronavirus. But more importantly, we make protection against that. So if we were to ever see the coronavirus in real life, we'd be protected because we've seen that spike protein that's similar to the actual coronavirus and made protection against that. So then with the coronavirus, we also have those spike protein mutations. Because I often get that question of, if we have these spike protein mutations, do we have to get vaccinated, or how protected would we be against the vaccine considering these mutations? So we have the spike protein. In the spike protein, we see that we have the T cells here, and then we have the antibodies. And then we see that these antibodies are different. So they're different colors, meaning that they bind to different areas of that spike protein there. So our T cells are our body's first line of defense against this spike protein. And then we have our B cells, or our antibodies, that come out to defend us. So you're injected with that mRNA vaccine. You then make that spike protein. After you make that spike protein, your T cells run out. They say, hey, this spike protein isn't supposed to be here. And then our antibodies, or our memory cells, or our B cells, reminds us a little bit after those T cells have come out, hey, we've seen this spike protein before. We know how to protect ourselves against it. So as we move over to this side, we see this change here. And that means that one antibody or this one piece of protection doesn't work in this one particular area. However, we see that we have these different pieces of protection that work against these different areas of that spike protein. So what this means is that while these viruses are smart, these viruses change, so they continue to grow and they can continue to live in us, our body is definitely able to make different types of protection to account for these mild changes that happen with the coronavirus as it continues to try to thrive and live in humans. So in lay terms, while we may have first had this amount of protection, or like 50,000 or 500,000 antibodies against the coronavirus, we now maybe have 400,000 antibodies against the coronavirus with this small change. However, this is still more than that minimum amount that we need to be protected against COVID-19. So it's still important that we get vaccinated. So then I like to go into the clinical studies just to kind of, like Dr. JC said, knowledge is power. So I want to give you guys just some knowledge to talk numbers about these vaccines. So in these clinical studies, there were about 40,000 individuals in each study. So all three of them that have been published and now available for consumption. So these studies are what we call randomized controlled clinical trials. So what that means is that these groups or these participants were randomly placed in a group to either receive the vaccine or not receive the vaccine. And those groups were about equal in distribution, meaning that you had about 20,000 individuals that received the vaccine that were randomly placed there, and about 20,000 that did not. So we had about 17.2% of those individuals included in the study that were Black, about 45.1% that were Hispanic, about 0.3% that were Native American, and then you had about 59% that were greater than or equal to 60 years old. So we know for a fact that this vaccine works in those majorly affected groups. So will these people that have been disproportionately affected by this virus be protected by these vaccines? The answer is we have evidence that they will be. So then we want to look at the number of COVID-19 cases. So we see 116 in the vaccine group, and then we see 348 of COVID-19 in the group that did not receive the vaccine. So that puts us at about 67% efficacy, meaning that you'll be pretty much protected should you develop COVID-19 after receiving this vaccine. None of these vaccines are 100%. So you really want to focus in on that fact of, if I do develop COVID-19, will I develop severe COVID and will I end up in the hospital? Because severe COVID and ending up in the hospital, we know is what results in death from COVID-19. And the answer is only 85% of individuals develop severe COVID, and no one ended up in the hospital after receiving the J&J vaccine. So that's how important getting vaccinated is. So of course, you do have adverse events. You can have a headache, injection site tenderness. Our bodies make protection against the coronavirus vaccine at higher temperatures. So you may get a low grade fever. So then we also have the Pfizer vaccine. Once again, it's about 40,000 individuals included in the whole study. Once again, it's randomized. You had about 20,000 individuals in that vaccine group, about 20,000 that did not receive that vaccine, about 9.3% that were Black, 28% Hispanic. You have a number of them that were greater than or equal to 55 years old, 0.5 Native American. While these numbers look smaller than the Johnson & Johnson study, they in fact are. Nevertheless, they're still quite representative of the numbers that we see of these populations and the United States demographic. So we can still say, hey, or extrapolate, would this vaccine work in these groups? So I like to always hone in on the fact that looking at the second dose is important, because these studies were designed to look at, does the second dose work against COVID-19? Because these companies, they realized that with this vaccine, to have the maximal amount of protection, you needed 2 doses. With Johnson & Johnson, you only do 1 dose, so it's called the one and done shot. And why is this? This is because they did their study and they said, hey, well, an individual that just received 1 dose of our vaccine respond just as well as someone that receives 2 doses of our vaccine. They didn't see any big difference. So they said, hey, we'll just give these people 1 dose of Johnson & Johnson. That is not the case currently with Pfizer and Moderna. You must receive 2 doses. So once again, in that vaccine group, we only see 8 cases. In that group that did not receive the vaccine, we see 162. So that is the difference between getting vaccinated and not. Big difference, 95% efficacy there. Of course, in that Johnson & Johnson study, we did in fact see a lot of those variant strains. The South African variant and the UK variant, the ones that we're seeing currently causative of COVID-19. So that may be why we see a bit of a lower number there against COVID-19. However, we know that none of these vaccines are 100% effective. So we want to once again look at who are those individuals that are actually developing severe COVID. So we see that there were 10 cases total of severe COVID. However, there was only 1 case in that vaccination group of severe COVID. So most frequently reported adverse events include a headache, injection site tenderness, and then lastly, that low grade fever. Our bodies make protection at higher temperatures. So that may be why you experience the low grade fever. And then finally, we have this Moderna study. Once again, we had about 30,000 individuals in this study, equally split into that group that received that vaccine and that group that did not. We have about 10.2% individuals that were Black, 20.5% Hispanic, so on and so forth. And then with this, like I said, quite representative of what we see in the current United States demographics. We want to look here. How safe was it, or what did we see after that second vaccine? Because we know you do need 2 shots of Pfizer and Moderna. 11 cases in that group that received the vaccine versus 185 in that group that did not. So 94.1% efficacy. That is that difference between getting vaccinated and not getting vaccinated. Once again, we know that this vaccine is not 100% effective. So we still want to look at how many individuals developed severe COVID. There were 30 cases total of severe COVID. However, there were 0 in that group that received the vaccine. Very important. Adverse events, once again, headache, injection site tenderness, and then that low-grade fever because of the way that our bodies make immunity. Nevertheless, all of these vaccines, we get that question of which one is the best, the one that is in your arm. All of these vaccines are going to get us to that place where we're able to have herd immunity, as Dr. JC explained. So what herd immunity is when about 70 to 80% of the population is protected against COVID-19, meaning that they've made immunity or protection against COVID. So you can make protection against COVID through either receiving the vaccination or by having the infection naturally. So we know that COVID-19 is volatile. We don't know how people will respond. So we don't want people to develop that infection naturally. We want them to develop protection by being immunized. So here we see these people that were infected. We see that it's harder for that virus to be transmitted from person to person. We see that it's easy, for that virus to go from person to person, right? We see this person getting it, this person giving it to this person, and so on and so forth. However, we see when herd immunity is achieved, and we want this to be immunity or protection that's been developed following receiving the vaccine, it is a lot harder for that virus to go from person to person. We see that with all these people being immune, it is only going from this person to this person rather than from this person to every other person here. So let's just take a real good look at this. So we see with that placebo group, or that group that received no vaccine, we see just an increase in COVID-19 cases. But we see when you do in fact receive that vaccine, is not as many COVID-19 cases. So that is the difference between getting that vaccine and not getting it. All righty, so I guess we can go into questions if you guys are ready. Hopefully that was good.
I just wanted to add to that chart. On our campus, when we started vaccinating our staff and our students who are health profession students, we saw a dramatic drop in COVID cases. I mean, at one point we were getting up to, just in the hospital, we're getting up to 150 people infected a day in the hospital that had to be, sent home, and it was affecting our workforce. But as soon as that vaccine started being distributed on campus, we saw a dramatic decrease in cases on campus. So we're starting to see that even in smaller groups and sites. There's a question by Amy.
Hi, doctors. Thank you for doing this. My question is, well, just so you can understand a little bit, my husband and I both got COVID in January. Unfortunately, he passed away, but I am interested in getting the vaccine. My question is, I have after effects of COVID. I have high blood pressure, which I've never had before, and my lungs still don't feel that strong. Should I wait till that is under control to get the vaccine, or should I just get it anyways?
Amy, I would definitely recommend that you get vaccinated. And I just say, because we don't know how long immunity lasts or protection lasts from naturally being infected with COVID-19. Yeah. So you run that risk of maybe developing COVID-19 again. And then you end up in that position of, having those after effects of COVID, and that just manifesting and being really bad, for you and your already compromised disease state. So already having the hypertension, already having the decreased lung function.
Yeah.
So I would definitely recommend getting the vaccine. Okay. You'll be fine. I'm not going to, and yes, so sorry for,
thank you.
Sorry for your loss, Amy.
Yeah.
Thank
very
you.
Sincerest condolences.
Our condolences and our hearts go out to you, Amy.
I appreciate it.
And you're not alone in this loss.
Absolutely.
It's been so hard. I do want to mention also that there's been some not definitive results and research around this, but we're starting to see some reports come back on long COVID and people who get vaccinated who actually their symptoms are alleviated after the vaccine.
Oh,
Yeah.
So this is not anything, I don't think it's been published yet, but we're starting to see some really encouraging data come back.
I agree with Dr. JC. I won't elude you and say that you won't have side effects because that's just an effect of the vaccine. I do want to be transparent about that. However, I do think that you would be a lot better off having gotten the vaccine and you won't run that risk of being infected with COVID-19, or in the event that you were, it definitely would not be hopefully severe, as that's not what we're seeing with the vaccine or post-vaccination.
Okay. Thank you so much, doctors. I appreciate that, and everybody's condolences. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I did get a personal question though from Debbie, and I want to make sure that I don't forget about that. Oh, and Veronica, it was, what about the vaccine only lasting 6 months? So Veronica, I guess this is one of those moments where Dr. JC talked about where we have to say we don't know, in regard to science, but it's just these studies are set to last for 2 years. So we'll get information in regard to how long these vaccines last quarterly or so, how long our immunity is against COVID-19. So right now, we know that it's about 6 months. We know that from Moderna and Pfizer. We're still waiting for that information to come from Johnson & Johnson, but we also have to remember that study started a bit later than the mRNA vaccine studies. So we'll likely have more information. My assumption is that they will release it quarterly in regard to how long we have protection. They're continuing to follow those first subjects that they had enrolled into these studies to see how long their immunity lasts. So so we will know for sure. Well, we'll know as frequently as the information is rolled out. I think that, and as I always say, I don't think COVID is anything that's going to fade away soon. We'll vaccinate against it this time, but I don't think it's going to be a one and done and we don't see the vaccine again. I'm just being completely transparent with you all as a clinician, as a scientist. I just don't see that for us. But I think that the encouraging thing is that modifying these vaccines is actually very much a seamless process. It's very easy to modify these vaccines to account for the variant strains, to make sure that it's as updated as required in the event that we had to get it yearly or every 2 years or every 5 years. But I always say, prepare for the worst, and if we don't have to get it yearly, then clap, clap, hooray. But if we do, you'll be prepared for it.
Yeah, and I think the technology around these vaccines is really unprecedented. Another thing that gets mentioned a lot is, these are new vaccines, but not really. They've been around for several years. The technology's been around. So, for example, the mRNA technology has been used with the Zika outbreak, and we've seen it, that technology being used around the world. So it's, in some ways they're new, but in others they've already been tried and put out there. But the technology is really pretty inspiring. What Dr. Jam just mentioned, the ability to look at the genetic makeup of the virus. And as it keeps mutating, because that's what the race is against right now, these mutating variants, and adjusting the ability of the vaccine to be more effective against the new variants. That's where I think the technology, the biotechnology, is really impressive.
So I had another question of, I heard receiving the vaccine may impact pregnancies. Is there side effects that that should concern women? So as of right now, the vaccine is recommended by the World Health Organization, by the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, meaning the OBGYNs that actually see pregnant women, as well as the CDC. It is and the FDA is recommended that pregnant women do receive the vaccine, just in terms of risk and benefit. it would be more of a risk for pregnant women to develop COVID-19 rather than to be vaccinated. However, as I explained in the initial when I began the presentation, was we have live vaccines and we have mRNA vaccines. So live vaccines actually contain a small piece of an alive virus. So in that case, that virus is sometimes able to move across your placenta and potentially affect the baby. So that's why when you are pregnant, they say don't receive any live vaccines, meaning don't get the shingles vaccine, don't get a live flu vaccine. They tell pregnant women not to do that, right? But the mRNA vaccines are not like that. So it's not an alive piece of the coronavirus. It's mRNA sending a message to our bodies to make the spike protein, but it's not alive. It's just a message sending system. And then it may not, move across. It may not, should not, likely not move across and affect the placenta, nor will it affect your ability to have children. So actually, in the Moderna study, women that did not know that they were pregnant but have received the Moderna vaccine reported in the study. So that should show you it will not affect your capacity to get pregnant. So there were 13 women total, 6 women that actually the 6 women that were pregnant and actually received the vaccine performed fine. There were some pregnancy related events that occurred. However, they occurred in that group of women that did not receive the vaccine. So you should not be worried about that in regard to the vaccine. I think that gives us kind of an idea of, is this vaccine going to affect the ability to have kids or the ability. So we don't know in regard to men, but it's very unlikely that it would affect any type of that it would affect them to have in their capacity to produce children, that it would affect the woman's capacity to carry the children. And in regard to that, they also tested pregnant rats with the Moderna study to see if they would see any poor pregnancy related events, and they did not. But also, there are over 100 million individuals that have received the vaccine, and of those that have received these different vaccines, and of those, pregnant women are included. And there have not been any significant pregnancy related events in regard to having received the vaccine. And then, more importantly, I can't remember what I was. Oh, they are going to be conducting studies with pregnant women, with lactating women. But I think that it's important that we understand that pregnant women are a very vulnerable population. So that means that ethically there are constraints with enrolling them into studies. So there's often not information readily available in regard to pregnant women, especially when it comes to using any type of new treatment. But yeah, I also have a question of
I just wanted to add, while you're still on
uh-huh.
the topic, my wife works in the NICU here at Loma Linda with the neonates, and you don't know how many COVID positive pregnant women had very complicated births. Some of the moms didn't even make it. They saved the baby, but not the mothers. So the risk, if you really look at, for pregnant women, like Dr. Jam was mentioning, it's much better to get protected against COVID than to get COVID while you're pregnant.
Absolutely. And then Josh asked a question of what would I say the best vaccine is? I would say the one that's in your arm. So whichever vaccine it is that you get, whether it be Moderna, whether it be Pfizer, whether it be J&J, I think that, of course, we have that number of, J&J is only 67% when compared to the 95 and 94. But with J&J, it did include a lot of the variant strains, which is not the case with the study with Pfizer and Moderna. And that's because, like I said, the J&J study was done a bit later. So I like to put this into context of the Moderna and Pfizer studies are more like Michael Jordan in 1988, and the Johnson and Johnson vaccine was more so looking at Michael Jordan when he played for the Washington Wizards. It's an entirely different, speed. It's an entirely different, beast that you're looking at. There are different factors that you're looking at in regard to the vaccine. 1988 is not Michael Jordan going against Kobe Bryant, which we can say that these variants are equivalent to. So, but at the end of the day, we know that J&J has some activity against it. We know that with the Moderna and Pfizer studies, but we can explicitly say, in the studies, there were variant strains represented, and this is the protection we have against it. But in all honesty, the flu vaccine has about 43% efficacy. So we are just completely amazed at the efficacy that we see with all of these vaccines. It was not to be expected that we would see the efficacy that we did see with any of them. So all three of these vaccines will put us at that step closer to achieving that herd immunity and being able to return to some sense of normalcy. So I say, like I said, with the vaccine that goes in your arm is the best one.
And I'm gonna put the My Turn link, which is the state of California link for finding the closest vaccine site to you. I'll put it on the chat.
We did also have another question. I think it's the last one that I got personally. Oh, maybe two more. And is my immune system still fighting against the virus following the vaccine? Will my immune system continue to fight it off for 6 months? So your immune system is when it sees that spike protein, it recognizes that it's not supposed to be there, so it makes protection against that. So we make what's called memory cells, or the antibodies that I said come out after our T cells, which is our first line of defense. So that reminds our bodies that we have been vaccinated against that spike protein, or that we've seen that a piece of the coronavirus before. So your body will remember, so should you see coronavirus, 3 months from now, your body will have protection or antibodies that stay there. And that's why we continue to have this information released from these studies, because we want to know, do we still have, those antibodies? Do we still have enough protection there to where we can fight off the coronavirus? So I say that to say that your body, we will have a certain amount or a maximum amount of protection there after 3 months, or those memory cells that are still present that let our bodies know that we have seen that coronavirus, that spike protein, and it'll fight against it. We just don't know how long we'll maintain a good threshold of protection against the coronavirus. So right now we know it's at least 6 months. So as we continue to get data, then we'll be able to say, okay, it's a year. Okay, it's 2 years. Okay, it's 3 years. But for right now, we know that it's 6 months. You will continue to have some type of protection against it. All of your protection doesn't just magically disappear, but we don't know if it will be enough to where you won't end up in the hospital should you get COVID-19 past that 6 month mark. So that's information that we'll continue to have.
I know one of the things that comes up a lot, and even with my mother, who we had to work on her for about a month and a half before she got her shot. She was very concerned about the side effects, and just getting very sick from the vaccine. What's been really interesting to watch is a lot of our elderly folks aren't showing any or very minimal, if any, side effects. We're still trying to understand that. I know when I took my vaccine, I got a low-grade fever the first night and maybe a little headache the next day. But within 24, 48 hours, it was all gone. But yesterday, we just vaccinated a 102-year-old woman here at Loma Linda. And so we're seeing a lot of elderly people come in of all ages. The first person to get vaccinated in the United Kingdom, I don't know if you remember, is a 90-some-year-old grandmother. Mm-hmm. And what she said was she just looked forward to actually meeting one of her grandkids who she hadn't even met yet, and being able to be reunited with their family. So, for those of you who are concerned about side effects and not feeling well, the alternative is much worse. And when you feel your body responding with a low-grade fever or a headache, just think of it as boot camp for your immune system. There's a training going on in your body to recognize and fight this virus. And that's what you're feeling. That's what fevers are about. Your body increases the temperature to be able to kill things that are invading the body and making you sick.
Absolutely. And then I have one last question that was asked, and it was what about individuals with comorbidities or with other types of disease states? Should they get vaccinated? To that, I say absolutely yes. So, in the event that you have cancer, or in the event that you have something like rheumatoid arthritis, and you take some type of immunosuppressive, meaning that it takes your immune system down, then you want to make sure that you talk to whoever it is that manages that therapy for you, because you may have to space it out. But they did include individuals with HIV in these studies, individuals with rheumatoid arthritis that may have just an immune system that's not the same as someone else that doesn't have those disease states. And they did not notice any type of poor adverse events or any type of poor effects in those individuals when compared to the other individuals that did not have those effects um, when they were given the COVID-19 vaccines. So I say that, rest assured, you should be fine. But the more importantly, you don't want to have those disease states and then not get vaccinated, right? So you are better off getting vaccinated against COVID-19.
I just got a
Yeah.
direct question here. If J&J is as effective as the other vaccines, being that it's only a one injection, which one do you recommend for an 87-year-old who doesn't wish to be vaccinated? Can a person receiving chemo be vaccinated?
Yeah, so a person receiving chemo definitely can. I would say just talk to your oncologist first, because it may be some. So they may say, okay, you get the vaccine now. They may have to do spacing with the chemotherapy. So just talk to them prior to you getting the vaccine, but you should be perfectly fine. We have had individuals with breast cancer, that have come to get vaccinated, individuals on chemotherapy, individuals receiving radiation, because it's more important for you to protect yourself against the virus and not get COVID-19, having cancer, than it is for you to get vaccinated. But you do want to make sure that you get vaccinated safely. So just make sure that you talk to whoever it is that manages your chemotherapy prior to you receiving it. But you should likely be just fine.
I would just add, if you have an 87-year-old who's reluctant, the J&J is probably the best vaccine for them if they don't want to come in twice. I know a lot of folks who are nervous about shots. Just getting the one and done is good. As far as the effectiveness, like Dr. Jem had mentioned, it's not really comparing apples to apples when we're comparing J&J to Moderna and Pfizer, because the vaccine trials were done at different times. There is more of a surge in COVID during the J&J vaccine trials, and you had the variants also that Pfizer and Moderna didn't have.
Yeah. And then I have a question of, someone asks, is a healthy lifestyle make any difference? Neri, I think that's a good question. And, it's important to have a healthy lifestyle, but COVID-19, it doesn't care, about your lifestyle. I have seen the healthiest of individuals in supreme health that have still succumbed to the virus. So, it's important that you continue to maintain your health, because, having hypertension, having these disease states, being diabetic puts you at more of a risk for passing away should you develop COVID-19, for sure, yes. But you just primarily living life with a healthy lifestyle and not doing any and not getting vaccinated does not mean that you'll get COVID-19 and not develop severe COVID-19. And I think that Amy's point was a really good one. She said that even when she developed COVID-19, now she has hypertension that she never had, after before having COVID-19. She said that now she has a decline in her lung function, and that wasn't the case before COVID-19. So even when you develop COVID, there are very much long-term effects that can affect your life. So, maintaining a healthy lifestyle is important. And I don't, say I don't negate what you're saying. That's very important. And I think that it's something that should be, definitely, stated. Maintain a healthy lifestyle, yes. But my job is to make sure that you all also understand the importance of getting vaccinated. There are no treatments currently against COVID-19. The drugs that we have for COVID-19, should you get severe COVID in the hospital, they do not work well. They do not decrease mortality. People still pass away. So the best thing that you can do is to work hard not to get it. And in the event that you do, you don't develop severe COVID-19. And the best way to do that is to be vaccinated.
And there's a question from Julie. If someone has already had or been infected by COVID-19 and has recovered with no post-COVID symptoms, is it still recommended to be vaccinated? And yeah, I think that the response is you get some protection by having had COVID, but the vaccine is still recommended for people who have had COVID just to get that extra protection. I don't know, Dr. Jam, if you wanted to comment on that.
No, that was perfect. I would have said exactly the same thing. And it's just we don't know how much protection that you develop having developed COVID-19. We don't know if someone with severe COVID develops the same amount of protection as somebody that has mild or moderate COVID. So with that being said, it's important that you get vaccinated because we know how much protection you develop after those vaccinations. It's measurable. We've measured that scientifically in the studies. We have not done that when you develop COVID-19. And also when you develop COVID-19, is we very much see reinfection, and we can see it as quickly as 2 months after you've had COVID. So that means we don't know how long those antibodies actually stay around from natural protection. From natural infection. So it's important that you do get vaccinated because we know, like I said, for at least 6 months, you are protected against COVID-19. I have a few questions that were asked privately, so I just want to make sure that I answered them. So why children under 16? They can be vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine, and that's it for right now. The vaccines have also opened up to the entire, so everyone can get vaccinated now. So there are no longer restrictions, at least in San Bernardino County. So for 16 and up, they can only receive the Pfizer vaccine. Why is this? Because Pfizer is the only study that included subjects that were 16 years and older. So Moderna and Johnson & Johnson did not include individuals that were 16 and up in their studies, which is why they are not approved for those age groups. They are testing individuals that are less than 18 years old now. So we may have information in regard to that soon within the next few months, but we don't have that information right now. So that is why they can only receive the Pfizer vaccine, but they can receive Pfizer. Individuals receiving plasma treatment, as long as you not receiving any plasma with any type of COVID-19 antibodies, you're fine with being vaccinated. That's okay.
There was a question about visiting family members who have not been vaccinated. If you're vaccinated, it's really, you're much more protected. It's them that you have to worry about, and just making sure that they. And I think there's another question about how do we deal with folks who are still very resistant to the vaccine. I think one is just listening and empathizing and not being judgmental. I don't think placing judgment on them helps. I think also just asking where they're getting their information, because a lot of times we're getting information from all kinds of places on YouTube and Facebook. And unfortunately, there's even some physicians who have gone online, but this is the very minority group. And they're not relying on the weight of the science that we have right now. And what we're sharing with you is really more based on the weight of the science from the CDC, from the FDA. And we're being honest with the things that we know and the things that we don't know. The CDC does recommend now that if you're in a group that's all vaccinated, you don't have to meet with masks on in smaller groups. I think that's the main thing is it does allow you some freedoms. But if you're ever in doubt, I think it's still good to wear a mask, especially if you're in public, in kind of populated areas, crowded spaces. And we do know that being outdoors is always better than being indoors. And we're fortunate with our California weather where we can do a lot of things outdoors, including I think schools are going to change. I know this is a group of educators and parents. I know there's been questions about, how safe schools are and all that. There are districts who have put in a lot into infrastructure, into, filtering and spacing and all this. I do think that more and more of our education might be more combined with outdoor education, like outdoor spaces. I think it's worked well. I know as a kid, I would have probably done a lot better in school if it was outdoors than indoors. I was one of those ADHD kids that didn't do well indoors for very long. So I think we're going to find ways of educating our kids that involves a lot more outdoor activity. These are great questions. I don't know if there's any other questions, if anyone wants to speak up, or just type it in the chat.
And just feel free if you want to raise your hand, and you can unmute yourself. That would be great.
I did have some stats that if there's a little bit, if you want to let me share my slides, I wanted to show you a little bit about some of the vaccine rollout and how we're doing. And also, I think it includes a bit of COVID and how it's impacted some of our communities. Let me see here. Let me go to... Can you see that okay? So if you look at how many people feel like they've had COVID-19, about 25% of Americans said they've had it. 67% know someone who's been hospitalized or died from COVID. And you can see the difference here between having tested positive for COVID or having antibodies. You see the difference in the populations here. The Hispanic population, which is 53% of our county across the country, has been probably impacted the most, and also pockets of African American and Native Americans. We've seen that quite a bit. Personally, know someone who has been hospitalized or died. You see the Black population is actually higher here. Followed by the Latinx population. Not to make this political, but politics unfortunately has gotten into this as well. It should be a non-political issue. It's a public health issue. But depending on what our leaders are telling us, we are influenced by that as well. Half of Americans intend to get a vaccine. So we've seen this increase. This is very interesting because if you look at the dip in the number of Americans who wanted to get the vaccine or intended to, what happened in September of 2020? What was that, Debbie? I didn't hear you. Oh, you're on mute.
It spiked.
Yeah, but
There was a spike.
There was a spike, but this was close to election time also, right?
Oh, yeah.
So yeah. I think a lot of people were just very concerned about the vaccine just being, used by either party, party being used as a political tool. So we saw a big dip in people even wanting to get vaccinated. But as the winter came on, and this is when we started seeing the cases getting worse, we saw the willingness to get vaccinated increase. So we're seeing this has actually gone up to about 30% of the country now being vaccinated. But we still have a long way to go to get to that herd immunity. 19% of adults say they've received at least one dose. This is, like I said, has gone up. We've seen a little bit more hesitation among women, which is interesting across the country. It varies by community, but that's changed. Also, a lot more people that are in their older years that are willing to do it. Upper income people, this is something very interesting. The communities that have been hit the hardest are some of the ones that have received the least amount of vaccinations. And that's what we're working on right now in San Bernardino, is really the equity piece. How do we bring vaccines to the communities who've been hit the hardest? And then the difference between urban, suburban, and rural, also in vaccine distribution. Those disinclined to be vaccinated cite concerns about side effects. So the biggest reason for not wanting the vaccine is side effects. The smallest is the people that just don't want vaccines. They're just completely against any type of vaccine. The people who don't need it a lot of times have not seen the impact around them of COVID, or some of the younger people who may have gotten COVID and were asymptomatic as well. Those are just some numbers that I think are interesting in looking at kind of how our ideas about the vaccine shift throughout time. Okay, I think if we don't have any other questions, Mars and Marissa, I think we're good with our side of things as far as sharing. I hope it's been useful to everyone. I know there's a lot of educators and parents. I do have a sense of optimism moving forward. That the vaccine is a big part of my optimism. But I do think that life will not be the same. We will adapt. Just like we adapted after 9/11, we're going to adapt after COVID. Because COVID, like Dr. Jam mentioned, I think will be coming back in different forms. We're just going to learn different ways of fighting it.
Well, JC, as I call you, thank you so much. And I don't know where Dr. Jam, she may have jumped off here, but what an impressive presentation by both of you. And I think that today is one of those areas where we'll all be able to make an educated decision. I love the fact that you say whatever vaccination you can get in your arm, get it, so that we can keep moving with our life. My wife was on this Zoom room today, and she texted me. She said, "Are you ready?" And I'm like, you know what? I'm getting there. So thank you so much. And such a pleasure to be able to partner with you as we've done in the past in such an important topic today, particularly because it's this personal choice, right? How do we make this personal educated choice? And you've done an amazing job helping us do that. Marissa, if you have any final thoughts on today.
Just also just echoing your words, Mars. Thank you, Dr. Belliard, Dr. Jam, who had another commitment and had to leave. But thank you, because you bring the passion to serve our community and your hope. And we need a lot of that. I know our kids are going back to school. We're back in our offices. And so adapting to this new, ever-changing reality that we have to do and in the best, safest way, it's really important. And so thank you for bringing your expertise to us. Like you said, to some of us it's very personal, because we know people and we've lost people. And so, Amy, once again, thank you for sharing your story. We are having you in our thoughts and prayers, and everyone who has been affected. And I want to just have gratitude towards our experts here and to our community who comes together. I did have a personal question here in the chat. Will we get a copy of this video? And yes, we will. We'll make sure that we send you a copy of the link. We will edit it, and hopefully Dr. Jam can give us her slides so we can also include this in the presentation, and we'll also put it in our social media so you can share in the community. The more information is out there, the better. So we'll make this available to everyone here, and please share with other families that you know. I'm going to now toss it back to Dr. Belliard so you can close us with your wisdom and your service.
But Marissa, before we toss it to Dr. Billy, I just want to also thank someone who's on with us today, is Robin McGyver Brown. We pivoted quickly to try to get this workshop going, and she was so supportive. And also our management team at County Schools was really supportive of saying, yeah, let's move this forward. It's important information. So I just want to thank Robin for being here to support us today and allowing us to pivot so quickly to get this information out to the community.
Yes, we would not be able to do any of this work if it wasn't for the amazing leadership we have. Thank you, Dr. MacGyver Brown. We have an amazing boss. And also thank you to Alma. She's also on the line, Alma Hernandez. She's always connecting us and sending you information. So if you have any questions, we will type our email on the chat and feel free to reach out to us so we can serve you in the best way we can.
Dr. Belliard.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone on this team, all the county schools for allowing for this this informational session. I think it's so critical. My whole team, I have a team of 12 staffers they're literally doing this full time right now. They've been helping with the Drayson efforts. People have postponed vacations. We worked pretty much 24/7 on this. I dream about this stuff every night, talk to my wife about it every day. It feels like wartime. And it is a war. It's a battle against this virus. And the good thing about crises like this, and I always tell my students in public health, the greatest generation, right, was known the World War II generation that unfortunately they're starting to phase out now. We have a few of them left. They were known as the greatest generation because of the crisis that they encountered and how they encountered it, how they responded to that crisis. They pulled together, they planted victory gardens, they volunteered, they signed up to go to the war. We're living in a time like this. It's not a human enemy that we're facing, it's a virus, which makes it even more difficult. And we have the opportunity to really have another great generation come out of this, where instead of being so divided like we've seen our country be just split by just so many different ideologies and things, that we come together as humans and that we take care of each other and that we express that empathy, that we share that pain with each other, and that we emerge stronger and better because of it. So I hope we don't lose this opportunity to do that. And we have a wonderful opportunity to educate our kids who are going to be the future of this society, to kind of grow up out of this crisis as a stronger generation and a more empathetic generation because of it. So that's just my closing thoughts on this. And thank you so much for your great questions and for the amazing work that you do. Educators are our heroes in our community, and we're here to support you also. I envision us moving more towards school vaccines in the near future. The clinical trials on children will be finished this summer. I see us providing vaccines to kids before the fall or early fall. There are some trials that are coming up, some results that are coming up on kids 12 and above, 12 and older, that are looking really good. I anticipate in the next couple weeks or so, we're going to open up the vaccines to children 12 and above already. So I think the schools are going to be great partners in this effort. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Belliard. And you're right, the schools want to partner. I think one of the challenges that we're going to have, and we talked about this kind of as a governance team being on a board, is that, what is the COVID vaccine liability going to be like for school districts, having possibly a vaccination clinic on site and God forbid something happened, but if it did, then who becomes the liable parties for this? Because that's a huge risk that we have to understand and work through. At the end of the day, I think we're going to be able to move through it, but it's just something to think about as you're partnering with a variety of school districts. So that's something that could be a hindrance to moving that forward. So just wanted to throw that out at you as a friend and as a partner. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending today's interactive webinar. Most webinars aren't as interactive as this, and so we appreciate your your opportunity to participate. Amy, again, our condolences to you. Your vulnerability showed today, and we appreciate that you did that for us. It shows the reality of the work that we're entrenched in. So thank you for that. And again, all of you that are here, my education partners and friends and family, we wish you the best, and we look forward to working with you. Additionally, in the other work that we do in our family and community engagement work. Again, thank you. And Dr. JC, thank you. Dr. Jam, everybody who made this possible. Alma, Marissa, and Boss Lady Robin. This has been an amazing opportunity, and I appreciate you all. Have a good rest of your week.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Take care.
Stay healthy and safe, everyone.
I did want to respond to Ms. Medina. The trials, what we're seeing right now, as far as, in case you get this question, what we're using right now as far as vaccines are not part of the trials anymore. That's all been proven and taken care of. The trials that continue are on the children and pregnant women and other populations.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Belliard.
All right.
All right.
Take care.
Have a good day, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye now.